28 is one example, where literally 50% of the budget is set aside. So before I can do anything, I've got to take 50% off. You know, at the time when it was passed by the people, everybody thought it was a great idea, and this is the upper income level for mental health services. We've got now a VLF, there's a ballot measure in November that will take some vehicle license fee dollars dedicated to the parks. And so what we've done is to take a lot of our general fund and lock it up for certain purposes. And so by the time we get ready to kind of look at the budget, you know, we don't have a whole lot of degrees of freedom. And interestingly, the two areas where we have no requirements in terms of providing services are in the human services and in healthcare services. That's one of the reasons why year after year we're looking at cutting healthcare and we're looking at cutting social service, because the budget has been locked up so much that we only have about 20% of degrees of freedom within our particular budget. 10 to 20% is all we have to play around with, and when you only have 10 to 20% to play with, particularly in healthcare and social services, it really limits our ability to provide for a lot of people here in California.
Do you, I guess then, can you tell, how are you guys going to work around that then, or is there a workaround?
The only way, unfortunately, that's the other problem. You know, if something is voted in by the people, the only way you can undo that is you've got to get another measure to then vote it out and to change it. And once it's voted in, it is extremely difficult to.
So there is no workaround.
Well, you know, in Prop 13.
Really. Now you have a limited amount that you can work around,
right,
basically.
You know, and Prop 13 is another example where, you know, it sits in there, and now, you know, we don't have a whole lot of dollars coming out of our properties and so on. And you know, the only way that we're going to change it is if we, the legislature, puts a ballot measure on there, and unfortunately that's sometimes a little difficult.
So if something's passed as an initiative at the ballot box, then the Senate or the state legislature cannot pass a bill to override it. Okay, thank you, I didn't know that.
I have a local question. Again, we were talking about revenue. San Francisco's again talking about closing our golf course. And I know you knew I would ask that question. Is there anything that we can do to save our golf course?
You know, kind of yes and no, because you don't have a vote on it.
Right.
You know, this belongs to the city and county of San Francisco, right, so you don't have a vote on it. You do have some influence in that, you know, clearly sitting within your own community and having the kind of relationships with member on the board of supervisor and the mayor would be extremely helpful. And so that's what I would suggest, to continue that relationship and to help them understand why this is important. And if there's some changes and modification, that there be some meeting of the minds and so on.
Okay. First of all, Senator Yee, I thank you for bringing attention to in-home support services. I'm on the County Commission on Aging, and so this is the first part of my, I guess, comment that it's an extremely serious situation, and I guess I have a question in that regard is why can't we have some kind of emergency expenditures for our most vulnerable? And I agree with your work with young people. You know, the elders are also connected to our next generation, and this is truly a terrible situation where people are only paid $8 an hour to go out and do probably the most serious work. So my first question is there legislatively a way to have some kind of emergency funds, you know, to really go directly to these people? And then my second question was more or less what this gentleman over there said. You know, I don't understand either why we can't, we're supposed to have the best minds in California, and I know in a household when you have a revenue problem, you have to darn well figure out a way to raise some more money. And sometimes you have to think outside the box, you know. As a mother, you have a cookie sale and you raise some money, but everybody's harping about what we're spending. I think there's probably a little bit too much government waste, but I agree that these terrible cuts, that we have to protect them, and can we find ways to either raise emergency funds, or also when we look at the structural deficit, to think outside the box and find another way to raise money in this state, if that's the problem. So,
well, you know, I want to thank you for thinking so highly of us in Sacramento.
most of the time.
You would think that we are the finest and so on. Unfortunately, there are individuals, and maybe that's my pitch too. You know, people talk about reforming the system. The basic reform that we need is that all of us really have to get engaged in electing people. You just cannot, you just cannot shirk that responsibility. But more importantly than that, when you vote, you just gotta be aware of who you're voting and who you're not voting. With that said, there are individuals who basically will not vote for any taxes whatsoever. And individuals have taken pledge and so on. So in that emergency appropriation you're talking about in the Senate, I'm going to need 2 more votes. I can't get those 2 votes. In some of those votes that we got, they extracted an open primary on us. They extracted a lot of things. I mean, Abel Maldonado is a pork barrel guy like you can't believe. You know, everything for himself and nothing for everybody else. And so the problem is getting those votes and then getting a governor who's going to willing to sign that emergency appropriation. That's the problem that we have.